Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to the whole Sonification World Chat team for hosting me today. Yeah, in the next 20-ish minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of my sonification studio, Loud Numbers. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the Decibels sonification community, and I'll do a small overview of the Data Sonification Awards 2025, which is just wrapped up. As Kate said, I don't have any slides, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. I'm just going to talk. I thought that would just be easiest, really, because putting together loads of slides, it's quite a lot of work these days because you got to make them look nice and everything. So yes, you can just gaze at my face instead. So Loud Numbers is a data sonification studio run by me, Duncan Geere, and my collaborator, Miriam Quick. And it's a virtual studio because I live in Malmö in the south of Sweden, and Miriam lives in Devon in the southwest of the UK. And actually, kind of because of COVID and all kinds of other stuff, we've only, I think, hung out in person, Miriam and I, maybe like 8 times in the 6 years that we've been working together. We talk constantly, and we have like check-in meetings every other week or something like that. But it's very rare that we actually get to hang out in person. So yeah, it's been a really, really productive and wonderful virtual collaboration that we've had over the last 5 years or so. I'll give you the quick origin story, which is that the very first time that we hung out together, we were at a conference in the UK in 2019, and Miriam told me about a project that she'd done called Sleep Songs, where she had taken breathing data from her and her partner while they were asleep and turned it into a choral piece of music. And I was at that point getting really, really interested in sonification because although I don't have any kind of formal musical training, Miriam has a PhD in music. She's like the brains of the operation. I don't have any kind of formal training. I have just been in bands my whole life and a DJ and various other things. And I've always loved music. But I was super interested in sonification and I heard that Miriam had done some. So I was like, yes, I'm going to talk to you. And we had a lovely chat. And then a few weeks later at an awards show, I basically went up to her and I was like, would you want to make a data sonification podcast? And she sort of gave me a maybe let me think about it kind of answer. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not going to happen. But then a few weeks later, she emailed me and was like, I've thought about it. Let's do it. And so we arranged a meeting. And from there, we pretty much started Loud Numbers as a podcast originally. And over the next 18 months or so, I think it took us about a year and a half, we sort of taught ourselves how to do sonification from resources that were online. And we put together the first season of a podcast with 5 episodes. There's one called The Natural Lottery, which is a techno track about climate change. We have a piece of music called Tasting Notes, which is it's sort of about the experience of drinking different kinds of beer with data from a professional beer taster. We have a piece called Boom and Bust, which is a jungle track about the US economy. We sampled a lot of different presidents. That one's kind of fun to listen to. There's lots of like air horns in it. It's good fun. We've got one called A Symphony of Bureaucracy, which is a classical fugue that tracks lawmaking activity in the European Union. And then finally, the last episode of season 1 is called The End of the Road. It's a kind of electronic requiem for the insect apocalypse, disappearing insects all over the world. And as I say, we made those tracks over the course of about 18 months. We released them in June and July 2021. And about the same time we released them, I got approached by an information designer that I knew called Valentina De Filippo. And she was putting together a piece called London Under the Microscope. It was an audio-visual piece. And she'd got this beautiful, beautiful representation of data from London during COVID. And she wanted it to have a soundtrack. And so she was like, can I pay you to make a soundtrack for me? She was like, I've hardly got any money, but can we do it? And I was like, yes, this sounds great. I would love to do this. So we put that together, and that was kind of the first paying sonification project I did. It's now in the permanent collection at the Museum of London. And then we started getting more emails. One of them was from an events company that was putting together a supplier event for Walmart. And it was their suppliers that did like sanitary products. And this was after about, yeah, a year and a half of COVID. And they had all of this amazing data about like toilet paper sales through different like sales channels over time during the pandemic. And you could really see like the kind of panic buying at the start, and then everybody ordering their toilet paper online, and then later on it was like it shifted towards most people picking it up in the car park. And we sort of asked them what like what do you want this piece of music to sound like? And they were like, they clearly hadn't thought about this at all, and they were like, maybe like American rock radio. And so we produced this like very, very strange American like radio rock kind of piece of music, with like organs and guitars and things like that, that was about Walmart's toilet paper sales. Very, very strange commission. Still to this day, one of the strangest commissions we've done. But yeah, now in 2025, we've done collaborations with jazz musicians, rappers, ambient composers, artists, academics, local governments, and lots more. We've also created lots of tools for sonification, bits of software that make the process easier. We have a sonification module for a piece of software called VCV Rack, which is a virtual modular synthesizer. We also have a script for the Norns music computer. Both of those things are free to use. But I'll quickly tell you about three of my favorite pieces that Loud Numbers has done over the past couple of years. The first one is called Hold the Line. And we made this in partnership with the Data is Plural podcast. And it sonifies Canada's wildfire season in 2023, which you may remember was a record-breaking year. Every single fire that was reported by the Canadian Forest Fire Centre between the 1st of April and the 30th of November is represented by a kind of click sound. And each real world day plays out over about 2.5 seconds of sound. And every time there's a new day, there's this bass note that plays. And fires that are started by humans are represented by a kind of ting of a Zippo lighter. Fires that started naturally are represented by the sound of a kind of wood crackle. And then fires of unknown cause by a generic ignition sound. And during the worst of the season, you sometimes hear more than 220 fires in a single day. It's like kind of like really crazy, intense sounds. And then in the background, we have a sort of roar that represents the area of forest that burns each day. With the larger the area that burns, the louder and harsher and longer lasting the sound. And when you have lots of large fires that are burning for several days, it kind of like these rumbles turn into a big roar. And then finally, there's a stack of musical notes that represents the cumulative area that was burned. But I think what I liked most about this project was not necessarily even the sonification parts of it, because over the top of it, you hear the voice of a person named Fern Yip. Fern runs the Earthkin Wilderness School in the forests of British Columbia, and she, during that year, experienced a fire passing through her property, and she was told to evacuate, but they decided they wanted to stay and fight that fire off. And she narrates her human experiences of fire during that season over the top of the data. And I think that's what's so powerful about it. It mixes these very, very human voices and experiences with the hard data underneath. And so you get the best of both worlds. The second piece I'll tell you about is called the Carrington event. And this came out of some experiments that I was doing to see how sonification might work in a sort of live performance-oriented context. And this was in collaboration with a friend of mine called Ben Dexter Cooley, who maybe some of you know. And we both took the same data set, and it was a data set from a solar storm from 1859. And we turned it into two different performances. His was quite ambient and calm and quite chill in tone, and mine was very like post-rock. I plugged my guitar into a modular synthesizer, and then I used data to change the sound the effects on the guitar. And so when the storm is low, you hear sort of radio noises and the guitar rings out cleanly. But when the storm gets more intense, the guitar gets swallowed up by huge clouds of delay and reverb, and the radio turns into white noise. It's kind of an intense piece. And I recommend giving it a listen. You'll find that on the Loud Numbers YouTube channel, as well as the Hold the Line thing as well. You can also find Hold the Line on the Loud Numbers podcast feed, but not the Carrington event. And then the third piece that I wanted to tell you about is called On Standby. And this was an arts commission for Region Skåne, which is the local, I guess it would be kind of the American equivalent would be like my state paid for me to do this. And what they're trying to do is explore how the creative industries can affect behavioral change when it comes to kind of climate related topics. And we wanted to look at the energy consumption of different household devices overnight while people are sleeping. We were trying to draw a parallel between the human need for rest and switching off, and then the fact that a lot of our devices are just on and consuming energy overnight. And so we asked 7 different volunteers in Malmö, in Sweden here, to use a smart plug to collect data on the energy consumption of a single device in their home over the course of one night, which was the 25th of August, 2024. And one person picked a fridge, one person picked their TV, one person picked their mobile phone charger, another one had their gaming PC. There was all kinds of different devices. And we then created a piece of music from that data. Each time a different device consumes half a watt hour of energy, which is about the same amount of energy it takes to bring a teaspoonful of water to boiling point, you hear a sound that is associated with that device. So there's a unique sound for the fridge, a different sound for the mobile phone charger, and so on. There was a water boiler and everything. And 1 minute of data from the night takes about 1 minute to play back. And so as a result, the whole data set takes 10 hours and 40 minutes to play through, which is the same amount of time as from when the first of our data collection volunteers went to sleep to the time the last one woke up. So it's like a real-time sonification. And we designed this in such a way that it's music to sleep to. The idea is that you play it out overnight and it's extremely chill and calm. You know, maybe you've heard the work of composers like Max Richter, who's also got an album called Sleep. We were inspired by that sort of thing. But instead, we put data on this. And many devices that are on standby don't actually consume that much energy, but they are always switched on. And so it does stack up over time. So basically, the way it works is if an appliance consumes more energy, you hear it more often. If it consumes less, you hear it less often. And some appliances consume more or less energy at different times of night. So the tempo that you hear that sound repeat changes as well. And then you also hear the voice, and this is sort of what I talked about before with the Wildfires Project. You hear the voices of our volunteers during the night as well. We interviewed them about their sleep habits and how they think about energy use in the home and how they deal with the long days and long nights at different times of the year in Sweden. We also have an interview with an energy saving expert, Nick Trapp from the Center for Sustainable Energy. And then right at the dead of night, around midnight, you hear an original poem, which was read by a poet named Anna Arvidsdotter, who also collected data from a project. She had a water boiler that she was collecting from. And yes, we played that back out on 2 local community radio stations. We did overnight broadcasts so people could tune in and listen, whether they were asleep or whether they were working throughout the night, if they were shift workers. And it's also available. We did a series of 3 different YouTube streams in different time zones as well. So I was getting up at all kinds of crazy hours of the night to start and finish broadcasts during that. I didn't sleep very well that week. But yes, you absolutely can listen to that. It's also on streaming services. I think all of the ones that I've just talked about are on streaming services. So you can go and look on Apple Music or YouTube Music or Spotify or wherever you get your streaming music. If you search for Loud Numbers, you'll probably find it. So that's a little bit of a taste of what Loud Numbers has done recently. We're currently working on a project about different agricultural climate scenarios in the UK for a research agency. And we're doing another project about the TV show Seinfeld. We're making a unique piece of music for each one of its 180 odd episodes. I don't know if anyone has ever done a sonification that has slap bass in it before, but now it exists. And I'm really excited about getting that out into the world, hopefully in the next few months. But I also wanted to touch on a couple of other topics before I finished. One of the things that we really care about at Loud Numbers is community. When we started, we found out that there were lots of people doing sonification, but they weren't really talking to each other. The kind of academics were over there, and the experimental musicians were over there, and the artists were over there, and the journalists and science communicators were there, and they didn't really interact very much at all. So we created a small community space using a piece of software called Discord that hosts chat rooms, and we called it Decibels. And you can find it at the web address decibels.community. And now we have a little bit over 350 members from all around the world. People sort of share their work and ask questions and inspiration and resources. We've done some talks and some workshops. We've done some challenges where people start with the same data set and make something with it. And we're super open to new people joining. There are no requirements at all. We just ask that people introduce themselves when they join. So please come over and check it out at decibels.community. And then finally, I wanted to talk about one more thing, which is that about 18 months ago, Paolo Cucciarelli and Sara Lenzi, who I believe spoke at the last round of Sonification World Chat, approached me about creating an awards program for sonification. And this was something that I had already been thinking about a little bit because I thought it would be another really nice way to bring the community together around a shared annual event that could also have the potential to reach people outside of sonification too. And we looked at existing awards programs in other fields, and we looked at some of the goals that we had set ourselves for what we wanted to achieve with an awards program. And we created something that I think is quite interesting. It's not like a sort of Oscars style awards program where you pick the best whatever of the year. Instead, it's a bit more like a kind of Michelin star thing. There's criteria that are set by experts. And if your work is good enough, if it meets those criteria, you get awarded. And all of the people that meet those criteria are awarded as equal winners. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water. So there are three categories in our first year of awards. We did a category for art pieces, a category for communication, and a category for analysis, which sort of includes academic and industry work. And to figure out the criteria, we appointed three committee chairs. Jamie Pereira handled art, Jordan Wirfs-Brock handled communication, and Myung-Jeon handled analysis. And they assembled a group of experts, and together with those experts, they came up with a set of criteria. And we got 81 entries for the first year of the awards, and all of those were then compared against the criteria. We had a team of volunteer judges, and we got three judges to look at each entry. And the way it worked is basically if two of them said that it met the criteria successfully, we awarded it. And you can go to sonificationawards.org to find the winners list and see the criteria. There's quite honestly some amazing work among the winners this year. I discovered so many pieces that I had no idea existed and have been hugely inspiring to me personally. It's so great to have what is effectively the state of art of sonification all assembled in one place. We've been really, really happy. It's a huge success. And on the website, you can also sign up to get notified when we open the next round of submissions, which will be later this year. We'll also be looking for, we need to sort of revisit the criteria for next year as well. So if you're interested in being one of the expert panel that helps set the criteria, we'd love to hear from you. You can find our email address there too at sonificationawards.org. Okay, I think that's probably enough for me from me. I hope that was interesting to some of you. If you want to hear more from Loud Numbers, you can sign up to our mailing list at loudnumbers.net. And we also have various kind of social media accounts under the same name. But yes, thank you so much for listening. I am very happy to answer any questions that you have.
First of all, thank you for presenting, Duncan. It's great to hear that there are even more people doing sonification than this group knows about. And I appreciated your arts, humanities, and STEM connections. My question came when you talked about how you were basically self-taught in sonification. And one of the things that I think is important to the GeoSonNet project is providing people with helpful resources. So I'm curious, what did you use to teach yourselves how to sonify?
Yeah. It's hard, or at least it was definitely really hard when we got started. We did look at some resources. We looked at some resources like there was a guy that does like history sonification. Was it like the sonification handbook or something like that? Is that a thing that exists?
That is a big resource. It's
Yeah, yeah,
very
Thomas Hemmann's thing. Yes, that's right. That was a big influence on us. But quite honestly, we sort of felt our own way through it from our, because we both have backgrounds, Miriam and I, as journalists. And so we sort of had the sort of storytelling side down. And specifically, we've both worked as data journalists. So we sort of had the data handling thing as well. And really, what we the bit that was missing was the how do we do this? How do we do this data storytelling in sound? And we had some ideas, absolutely, and some of them didn't really survive contact with reality. Like when we did the first draft of our climate change piece, for example, we had like 20 layers of data all controlling different parameters of the sound. And it was just a mess. It was like, no, you couldn't get anything out of that at all. And we listened to it and we're like, this is not working. And so that was the point at which we like stripped it way, way back. And we were like, what is the absolute minimum that we need to do here to tell this story and not go any further than that? And instead fill in the rest of the sound with things that make it resemble music. Like one of our goals from the start is we wanted to create pieces of music that people would press play on more than once. That was like a guiding principle for us. And so we wanted it to sound good. We wanted it to sound like music. And for data to be a part of that, but and you know, probably the foremost part of it, but also for it to be listenable and pleasant and everything like that. So there was a lot of trial and error. I had some coding background at that point, so you know we did most of it in a piece of software called Sonic Pi, which is a sort of Ruby-based sound coding, live coding environment. People who do like live coding at concerts, live music coding at concerts use it quite a lot. But we found it quite useful as a starting place to do sonification work. Since then, we've moved on to using like Ableton and you know, some of our own tools that we've built and things like that. Does that answer your question? I think it sort of rambled in the direction of it, I think.
Yes, it answered it. Because I think one of the things we're trying to figure out is what would be a good toolkit or toolbox in terms of sharing with researchers that are potentially interested in getting
Mm,
involved in sonification. So it helps to point them to some things, and it also helps to point them to what you're saying is you just have to get in there and do it and learn
yeah,
as you're doing it and be open
you
to
absolutely do.
possibilities.
But I would also say stay tuned because I think Aura is going to talk about something very exciting when it comes to resources very shortly.
All right, great.
let's
Thank you.
let thanks. Let's let Leaf have a chance here. Thanks, Leaf.
Sure. That was great, Duncan. Nice to hear you talk. I just want to first of all say that the decibels thing is great. It's a
Oh,
it's a really, really nice resource. I feel like I've discovered stuff there, and yeah, thank you for putting energy into that.
oh, thank you for saying so. It's yeah, it's been a real joy seeing it grow over the last couple of years. So yeah, thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, I've found resources there. I mean, I think the answer to the previous question in some sense is go check out, all the
Yeah.
resources that people point to there because you will find something. It's great for all levels, really.
Yeah, and we've also tried to assemble a few beginner resources like from the decibels community. So there's a little bit there as well that might be worth checking out.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I keep jumping in before you get to ask your question. So go
Oh,
for
no
it.
worries. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's sort of a bit of a fuzzy question, right? But I'm coming to sonification both from the sort of art side, so I appreciate what you're doing, but also kind of from the research side. And one of the persistent questions that I get when I present sonifications to academics is, well, did you actually learn anything? And so I guess maybe I would ask that question to you, right? It's pretty clear. I mean, I definitely appreciate the desire to have it be listenable, right? Because
Yep.
many of them are not. Uh, but that other one is trickier, right? And so I don't know. I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on whether you can learn something new by listening to
Yeah.
this way.
I kind of feel like the reason. Okay, so as I said before, my background is as a journalist, and I have been doing like my day job, if you don't call the sonification stuff a day job, which sometimes it is, but my day job really is making data visualizations. And so most of the time I'm working in the visual realm. And the thing that got me super excited about sonification was what it adds that visuals do not. And what I think that is emotion. Like sound has an amazing ability to reach people and get them to feel things in a way that looking at a graph doesn't. Like you can look at all kinds of graphs and you won't feel anything. Whereas if you hear a well-crafted sonification, you really feel what it's talking about. And that has very much been our guiding principle since from the start in loud numbers. Our data is our sonifications are always, accurate to the data. Like that's not something that we compromise on. But when it comes to doing the sound design and sort of like figuring out what sounds are we going to use to represent this, we will absolutely lean into things that get people to feel stuff. And that's kind of against this idea that sometimes so I have an academic science background, and I always come up against this idea sometimes when I'm talking to academics that the data is somehow neutral and it should speak for itself and things like that. And like that is patently untrue, right? It was collected by humans. It exhibits all of human biases and everything. Like there's no such thing as a neutral data set. And so as a result, like when you're freed from the need to represent something in a neutral way, you can really start to think, what stories can I tell with this instead? So when I get academics sort of saying, what did you learn here that we wouldn't have got from a chart? The answer isn't necessarily like I discovered something new, at least in the kind of work that we're talking about. I know that there are some great people, especially in the astronomy sphere, who do fantastic work learning things from sonification systems. But in the kind of work that we do, we use sound to get people to feel things, not necessarily to learn things, because we think that like people don't change their behavior when they learn things. They change their behavior when they feel like they need to. And so that's very much the guiding principle behind the way that we approach it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Micah, Lewis, go ahead. And
My question is about so you seem to have a very heavy emphasis on narrative and telling stories with the data, which I really appreciate. And I was wondering how that impacts the audience that you get with your podcast, and do you know anything about who's listening? Is it really just academics, or is it reaching towards a general public and things like that?
It's definitely not academics. I, we're very much aiming at the general public in our work. Yeah, perhaps some academics are listening, but that's certainly not the audience that we are aiming at. Like a lot of our work is quite, you probably got it from what I was describing earlier, but a lot of our work is kind of activist in nature to a greater or lesser extent. And as a result, the kinds of people that we're trying to reach are really the people that have power to change things, and that can be the general public. If we think that that is going to be ineffective strategy for driving behavioral change, but sometimes it can be policymakers. You know, some of the work that we're doing that I mentioned very briefly at the end recently on agricultural climate scenarios, like that's absolutely aimed at a policymaker audience. We want to put data into a context that will be easier for people who don't necessarily have that much experience working with data and understanding uncertainty and things like that. Trying to get that to be more understandable and more relatable for some of those people. So while I like and then in terms of the podcast itself, one of the kind of my personal rules is like never look at the stats for like how many people are listening to it, because that way it just lies terror and just making me feel like I'm not doing anything useful in the world at all. So I don't actually know how many people are listening to the podcast. It seems to be enough that we get in commercial inquiries, so you know that's sufficient. But yeah, I do think it's important to try to make sonifications for as broad an audience as you can. Like, absolutely, there's a value in making complicated systems that people who are trained to use them can get a lot of information out of. But I think it is equally important to create sonification systems that you don't need any training to understand and that you can immediately engage with without special training or needing it, like having it be explained extensively before you begin. Like, I think that very much that's the way that you can like change behaviors and drive people to think differently about the world, is by reaching them in new and novel ways. And I think sonification is a really good way of doing that. I will just also, in voice, reply to Robert's direct message that he just messaged me. He's saying that the link on decibels.community is not working currently. So I'm actually going to post a new invite in the chat, if I may, which you can use to sign up. And then I will immediately after this go and fix the link on the website so that it's working. Thank you for letting me know that it's not working.